Everyone has a favorite Pokemon, but competitive Pokemon doesn't care about that. It cares about stats, speed tiers, and which legendaries you're allowed to bring. That made me wonder, what happens if you ignore all of that? Let's go back for a second. You're 9 years old, you just got your first Game Boy Advance, and you're about to play Pokemon Fire Red for the very first time. You look at the cartridge, it's blue. Flip it over, Pokemon Sapphire. Not Fire Red, but when you grow up the way I did, you don't complain. You slide it in. Wait, it needs batteries? And why is the battery cover duct taped? Whatever, batteries in, power on. Kyogre stares back at you. And just like that, the adventure starts. I made it all the way to the Pokemon League champion, but that part isn't what I remember. What I remember is the one Pokemon that never left my team. Through every gym, every rival fight, every moment where I thought I was about to lose. Blaziken. It was there when I didn't know what I was doing, when my movesets made no sense, when I spammed Fire Punch because I thought it looked cool. And every time things got rough, Blaziken pulled through anyway. That Pokemon didn't just win battles, it grew up with me. And I think that's why favorite Pokemon stick with us. It's not about stats or typings or what's competitively viable. It's about who was there when you didn't know any better. And for me, that was Blaziken. But here's the problem. Competitive Pokemon doesn't care about any of that. It doesn't care that Blaziken carried me as a kid. It doesn't care about nostalgia or loyalty or favorites. It only cares about what wins. And that's when this stopped feeling like a fun idea. Because if Blaziken failed here, it would kind of feel like I failed too. But that's also why I had to do it. Bringing Blaziken into VGC isn't just difficult, it's almost disrespectful to the format. This is a metagame built around speed control, perfect damage calcs, and Pokemon that were literally designed to be broken. Blaziken was designed over 20 years ago. It doesn't have the stats, it doesn't have the typing, and it certainly doesn't have the reputation. And if this doesn't work, it's not just a bad team. It's proving that all of those memories don't matter anymore. That the Pokemon I grew up with doesn't belong here. Every opponent I queue into is bringing 2 legendaries, Pokemon that define the entire game plan before turn 1 even starts. Meanwhile, I'm showing up with Blaziken and hoping my belief counts for something. So I made a rule for myself. I wasn't allowed to drop Blaziken, no matter how bad the losses got, no matter how many people told me it was a bad idea. If this was gonna fail, it was gonna fail honestly. And that meant I had to be okay with losing a lot. Because every loss wasn't just a step backwards, it was the format telling me I should have let go a long time ago, but I didn't. If Blaziken was going to survive here, it couldn't be the hero anymore. In older formats, Blaziken had a job. Speed boost, swords dance, win the game before your opponent could breathe. Mega Blaziken used to run away with games. But this isn't that format. There are no megas, and when every team is built around legendaries, trying to set up Blaziken just turns it into a sitting duck. So I stopped asking, how do I make Blaziken strong? And instead I started asking, how can I make Blaziken matter? I went back to the drawing board, different items, different moves, anything that let Blaziken stay on the field longer than one turn. And that's when I found it, coaching. Instead of trying to out-damage Pokemon it was never meant to beat, Blaziken could instead make my other Pokemon stronger. I went with a specially offensive set, less about sweeping and more about supporting. Suddenly, Blaziken wasn't trying to steal the spotlight, it was setting the stage. And that's when I saw the angle. Blaziken didn't need to win the game itself. It just needed to be there long enough to tip the balance. If Blaziken could make one partner Pokemon unstoppable, then every win would still belong to it. The first question this raised was simple. Which Pokemon wants to be buffed? There were a few obvious answers like Groudon, Kelly-I, and Zacian C, but I didn't go with any of those. I instead went with Koraidon. Koraidon is already one of the strongest Pokemon in the format, so giving it +1 attack and +1 defense just pushes it even further over the edge. And then there's the Sun. Koraidon's ability sets it automatically, meaning that Blaziken's fire type attacks get even stronger. But here's the problem, because all of this assumes one thing: that I get to play at my speed. When the game slows down, when Trick Room goes up, Koraidon becomes awkward, Blaziken becomes fragile, and suddenly that perfect synergy doesn't matter anymore. If this team was going to survive, it needed something that wanted the game to slow down. That's when I added Terapagos. You probably already know this Pokemon, but just in case you don't, here's why it matters. Terapagos is slow, especially offensive. It's also the only Pokemon in the game that can't change its Terra type. And when it does Terra, its signature move Terra Starstorm becomes absolutely devastating. But this isn't one of those builds where Terapagos just shows up and deletes things. That wasn't the plan. Our Terapagos wasn't built to one-shot on turn 1. It was built to endure. Sort of like a meat shield. Something that could sit in front of Trick Room, refuse to go down, and let the game play out on our terms. With Calm Mind and Protect, Terapagos does two things at once. It burns Trick Room turns, and every turn it stays alive, it becomes more dangerous. While the opponent thinks they're in control, Terapagos is quietly setting up to take over the game. And that's when it clicked. Blaziken doesn't need to be fast if the game slows down, and Terapagos doesn't need a rush if Blaziken's there to support it. One Pokemon that grew up with me, one Pokemon that thrives when things go wrong. Together, they cover each other's weaknesses. And at that point, the core was set. Blaziken, Koraidon, Terapagos. Everything else had one job: keep them alive long enough for the plan to work. On paper, it finally made sense, but belief doesn't win games, so I queued up my first match in the ladder to see if Blaziken really can pay off. Going into the first game and seeing Kyogre and Zacian on the other side of the screen, I felt weirdly calm. If we could just get Tailwind up, this was playable. So I led Tornadus and Rillaboom, Koraidon and Blaziken waiting in the back. Turn 1 went exactly how you hope it does. Fake out pressure, taunt lands, suddenly we're the faster team. And this is why Rillaboom is so terrifying. It doesn't win the game, it lets everything else start working. Zacian hit the field, and for a second I felt panicked. I thought I needed damage, fast. I targeted the Tornadus, and looking back, that might have been wrong. Rillaboom went down, and that's when it happened. Blaziken hit the field for the first time. Not to attack, not to sweep, just to exist long enough for speed boost to kick in. Protect, taunt, let Tornadus fall. Because if this team was ever going to work, it was going to be right now. 2 Pokemon left. The 2 this entire idea was built around. Zacian staring us down. I terrestrialized Koraidon. Flare Blitz. Heat Wave. Heat Wave is 90% accurate, so it never feels safe. But this time, it lands. And Zacian drops. Urshifu comes in, but the game is already over. We take our first win, and then it doesn't stop. And then we hit our first real wall, Lunala and Koraidon. A matchup that has everything, speed control and raw speed. I could feel the Trick Room coming, so I led Koraidon and Tornadus, Terapagos and Blaziken waiting in the back. Turn 1 was a disaster. I taunt the Lunala expecting Trick Room, but it goes for Meteor Beam, straight into Tornadus. Gone. And we haven't even reached turn 2. I'm already playing from behind. I bring in Blaziken, hoping this is where things turn. I know I have to terrestrialize Koraidon to live a fairy attack from Flutter Mane. It's the only line that makes any sense, but my opponent reads it perfectly. They double into Koraidon, and just like that, it's become a 2v3. Then I see it. There Koraidon in the back. and my heart just sinks. I know instantly that we played this wrong. I can see all the turns that I should have taken, but this isn't that version of the game. In this one, we lose. I wasn't certain that this team was out for the count, so I decided for one last match before making my conclusion. The final game starts. Miraidon and Ho-Oh. Pure speed, pure pressure. I lead Rillaboom and Tornadus again, Blaziken and Koraidon in the back. Same lead as the first game. But this time, I'm not guessing. Fake out into Miraidon. Tailwind goes up. We have control. Bleakwind Storm softens the board. Woodhammer slams Miraidon into the red. And then I realize something. Iron Valiant learns Wide Guard. So the only play now is to remove it. And I just have to accept that Rillaboom and Tornadus are about to go down. Dazzling Gleam from Miraidon leads to a double knockout. And just like that, another 2 versus 3. This keeps happening, and every time it does, it seems like it's the same 2 Pokemon left standing, Koraidon and Blaziken. I terrestrialize Koraidon, Heat Wave with Blaziken, and the opponent switches Ho-Oh in. Fake Out stops my Koraidon from moving, and Heat Wave barely scratches them. Tailwind fades, and this is the turn. The turn we built Blaziken for. It's coaching time. Collision Course drops Incineroar. Ho-Oh sets Tailwind. Now it's just Miraidon and Ho-Oh, the last 2 obstacles. Dazzling Gleam brings Blaziken down to its focus sash, 1 HP. Brave Bird crashes into Koraidon. Heat Wave chips. Flame Charge removes Miraidon. I try Aura Sphere into Ho-Oh and it looks useless, but after Collision Course and the recoil from Brave Bird, I see it. We're both in range. This is it. The final turn. Blaziken is barely hanging on with 1 HP. And we need to land a Heat Wave at 90% accuracy. Everything we have worked for until now, it all comes down to this. To be clear, Blaziken isn't the best Pokemon in the format. There were games where bringing it would have been a mistake, and moments where I couldn't afford to click it at all, but that wasn't the point. What this proved to me is that viability isn't always about raw power. Sometimes it's about care, understanding, and building something with intention. This experience taught me 2 things. First, if something matters to you, don't be so quick to let the game tell you that it doesn't belong. And second, that favorite Pokemon you've had since you were a kid, it might not win every game, but if you're willing to build around it, it can still have a place. Most of us don't play Pokemon to chase perfect teams. We play because of moments like this. And for me, this moment belonged to Blaziken, the Pokemon that's been with me since I was 9 years old. It wasn't about letting go. It was about trusting it one more time. Hey guys, thanks for watching. If you did like this video, please consider subscribing. It means a lot to us. It doesn't cost you anything and it just shows us that you really enjoyed the video and you want to see more. It did take a lot of effort to make this video. It's my first ever project, so it took quite a while and I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you got something out of watching my journey through this video. So leave a like on the video. It promotes us to the algorithm gods or whatever you want to call them. And yeah, drop a thumbs up.